Hey everyone, my name is Nico Guerrera and I'm with the Cloud Operations Tech Marketing team. Today I'm going to give you a quick demo on a new feature in Log Insight Cloud, Log Partitions. Log Partitions are a powerful new feature that can help customers save on ingestion costs as well as organize their log data into index and non-index buckets. So if we log into our Log Insight Cloud instance and we go to our Log Partition section, we can see here that we have two kinds of partitions. We have index partitions and non-index partitions. Index partitions are standard high performance partitions that run on high performance AWS disk. It is very quick to run queries in these partitions, and all of your logs automatically go into the default partition if you have no other partitions. Now we have here one index and one non-index partition, and you can change the ingestion order of your partitions depending on what you want to index first, second, third, and so forth. So as we can see here, I have some DNS logs that are the first thing that are ingested. So once these logs come in, they're immediately ingested into this new index partition, and they do not go into the default logs partition. This partition is 50 gigs in size. We can see the oldest and latest ingestion and the retention period. Now this is very important because standard retention period for Log Insight Cloud is 30 days. And the maximum retention period for an index partition is also 30 days, but you can have it as low as 1 day. So we only want to keep these DNS info logs for 3 days. So maybe we have some important information we want to get from these logs only within the first few days that they're ingested. Maybe we want to see if there's any spikes or any dips or any issues with performance. We can see that. And so after that, maybe we don't care about these logs anymore. We can drop them. So after a 3-day period, these logs are dropped from the index partition and are filled with new ones. So you can use these index partitions if you have very valuable logs that you want to see. So for instance, maybe a DevOps log that maybe you push out a new deployment, and then you can see if the deployment's working for a few days, and then the logs will drop after that. The storage underneath these partitions are very performant. There's a standard ingestion cost for these logs, and there is no cost to query them. So we can see here, over the past few days, this is my filter, log type contains console. So anything with a log type contains console is going into this DNS info logs partition, and it's being kept for 3 days, and it's keeping 50 gigabytes of logs. Then always, if we wanted to see the logs, we can just scroll down and go from 5 or 30 minutes, anything like that, and we can see what kinds of logs are in this partition. And we can also go into the Log Explorer and query these logs from here. And our second type of partition is a non-index partition. This partition is on a lower class of storage. It is an S3 bucket, so it's not as performant as the storage that the index partitions sit on top of, but the ingestion cost is much less, and you can keep the logs for up to 7 years. So here I'm keeping logs that are GitHub pushes. So every time somebody pushes some code into GitHub, I keep that log so I can see who's pushing code into GitHub. And this is being kept for 90 days. So maybe something like this we'd want to keep a little longer to make sure that people aren't pushing any malicious code into GitHub, and to make sure that all the proper users have access to GitHub and are pushing code that needs to be pushed into their production GitHub environment. The log volume is only 400K, and it's number 1 in our ingestion order. So this partition will be the first to ingest logs when they come in from GitHub. So if we drill in deeper, we can see this is a non-index partition. These are my routing filters, repository name exists, and commits committed. So let's check out some of our log in our non-index partition. So we get a quick warning that the time range has to be no greater than 7 days. So we proceed. We can see here that for that range of 7 days that I had put in, we have some GitHub logs of some GitHub commits of some code. So now you can use this to make sure that the proper users are committing code into GitHub, and you can see who's committing code, into which repository it's going to, and everything else. So then we can keep these for 90 days, make sure that our users are doing everything they're supposed to be doing in GitHub, and then after 90 days it will clear out. And as I had mentioned before, you can keep between 30 days and 7 years of information in a non-index partition. There is a small fee to query data from a non-index partition, but the ingestion cost is pennies to the dollar as opposed to ingesting into a index partition, which has a shorter storage period and a higher initial ingestion cost. So if we click create a new partition, this is our screen for creating a new partition. We give it a name, a description. We specify if it's an indexed or non-indexed partition. If it's an index partition, the maximum retention period is 30 days. If we choose non-index, the maximum retention period is 7 years, and we start with 30 days. We can group the data for querying. We can add one of our favorite queries. So let's say we already have a query that we like to see. We can pull it from our favorite queries, and it will create the filter from that query. Then we can also forward data to an index partition. So if the data is very valuable to us and we want to keep it for a short amount of time and have it query quickly, and then also keep it for a longer amount of time and, keep it in reserve, and maybe we have to query it down the line, we could send it to both an index and the non-index partition at the same time. And then you can also add filters to forwarded logs. And then finally, we have log recall. So we can create a configuration here, as this says, to pull logs from a non-index partition to a recall partition. So when you recall the logs, you're billed for the log volume, but not for querying the logs. So we give this configuration a name. We choose which partition we want to recall from. We choose the time range. And then we can choose, like with creating a partition, a favorite query, or we can create our own query. And then when the recall completes, we can choose to notify a recipient. And then when we click recall, the logs will start recalling, and then you will see a recalled log partition here. And then you can query the logs that you have recalled to look for any specific log events or information that are important to you. And then if you want to use the Log Explorer to explore a certain partition, you can do that here. So if I want to search for my DNS info logs, you just want to do that partition for the past 5 minutes. We are only searching for the logs in that partition and not the main index partition. So if you know which partition your logs are for, you can cut down a lot of querying and cut down a lot of time by using the Explore Logs feature on that DNS info logs partition. So that's our quick demo on Log Insight Cloud log partitions. Hopefully your customers will find it useful for long-term log retention or to just save on overall ingestion costs. Thank you so much for watching.